Good time zone, friends. It's Druidsfire, and I'm coming at you with my general overview of PAX East 2026. So, this is my roundup. What we're going to do over the course of these videos is go through the games that I checked out at the convention, and you see what I found fun, what I found interesting, and maybe some stuff that maybe I just maybe wasn't the right audience for. That definitely can happen. For example, I didn't do horror games. That being said, let me tell you about PAX East in general this year. One thing about PAX is that it was definitely a lot more chill than it has been in previous years. Definitely a smaller convention, even though there was stuff in every four each of the four segments of the newly renamed Boston Convention Center, now named the Thomas Menino Convention and Exhibition Center, after the late mayor of Boston. But in general, PAX East this year, the overall vibe was kind of chill. It was laid back. The longest lines I saw for anything was the Nintendo booth. And I was actually a little bit surprised that despite how awesome the Nintendo booth looked, that the lines were actually to get your photo taken in that diorama. Maybe I just missed the gameplay line. I don't know. But one of the big differences is that other than Nintendo and the Magic folks right up front, there weren't a lot of huge booths unless you wanted to buy something. That's one thing I really noticed. This year was a lot less about games, if that makes any sense. Because as you can see this picture looking toward the forward, most of those booths, about a good 2/3 of those booths, are just selling things. They're not even necessarily selling games. They're selling nerdy stuff. This is a convention full of nerds. Let's buy nerdy stuff. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. And a lot of them were actually selling specific games. Here, do a demo of this game and then buy the game. Okay. But some of them were just generic nerdy booths. It's like, oh, this is this brand. Go buy our stuff and we make these things. Or we're licensed to sell things for XYZ game. And that's cool, but it's not really, you don't get to sit there and play a game. So, one thing I did notice, again, a lot more merch. And a lot more buy our stuff and a lot less about games. I did notice, other than a couple of big names there, like Nintendo here, the Magic the Gathering people had a big old booth. I did notice a lot of space available everywhere. There, even on Saturday, which is always the most jam-packed day, there was lots of space to just, you weren't bumping elbows with people left, right, and center. Except in a couple of the smaller aisles between booths where like somebody's standing in front of booth A and somebody's standing in front of booth B across the way, and then two lanes are trying to go through, and it's a one lane bridge. So that was always an issue. That was a bit of an issue. But in general, the other thing I noticed about booths is most of the booths, like the Do a Crime booth, they took down their thing. So you don't know where the hell they are. That's one thing I did notice about PAX East this year. And it has always been a PAX problem. A couple years ago, they like rearranged booths and didn't tell anybody. And like the exhibitors had to let their people know, oh no, we're over in this booth over here. Or our booth number is still the same, but our booth is actually over in this other place. There was a bit of that. And it was kind of annoying because I was actually late to a couple of my appointments because I couldn't find the booth. They moved, or their booth number changed, or worst of all, they took down the booth number or covered it up with some kind of placard or some banner or something, so I couldn't see which booth I was supposed to be at. And sometimes, like, your when you get press and creator invites, the name of the person you're supposed to meet is like some PR person who works for Company A, who's doing PR for the actual dev company. So sometimes it's like, oh, I've got to meet such and such with this PR company, and I'm looking for that PR company name, but I'm actually should have been looking for sometimes people need to keep their names straight, and it's very, very tricky sometimes. So overall, again, the space was not full even on Saturday when I would expect there to be the most people there, and there were the most people there. But in terms of how crowded the place was, it wasn't very crowded at all. Um, I went to 3 panels the entire weekend. One was an invitation panel, specifically invited as a content creator, and that room was not full, and that was the main stage. That was the Warframe Soulframe one. I mean, there were a lot of people there, but I wouldn't say that it was like the biggest. They did not fill that room to capacity in the slightest. The other 2 panels, one was, full disclosure, my friends Rich Weil and Linda Carlson always do a get in the game industry and how to maintain, how to navigate once you're in the industry panels. And those used to be packed. Even a couple of years ago, I had trouble getting into that room, even though I'm friends with these guys. That's why you show up early. But this time, I wouldn't even necessarily say it was because their panel was on Thursday, and the other panel I went to was on Sunday afternoon. I wouldn't necessarily say that those were not packed because of the time. I mean, that did have some relevance, but it wasn't the only thing going on there. That being said, the panels I went to were great. Rich and Linda always, throw a good party. The other panel I went to was about strong female characters, and I was acquainted with one of the panelists, Cypher of Tyr, a friend of myself and my sister. And yeah, it was definitely a wonderful panel. Mad respect to the panelists. It was really informative. I just kind of wish I didn't have to put out a moderation fire in the middle of the panel. And I actually did apologize to Cypher afterwards. Like, I'm really sorry. I didn't want to say I was, but this is what I kept looking down at my phone. I was actually handling a mild crisis at the time. All was well. It's all good. It was just, I was handling some messaging for something that needed to get messaged. And then life was good. All right. That being said, as this slide says, small indie games are making an impact. That is definitely true. I mean, other than like a couple of big names there, like again, Nintendo, Magic the Gathering, most of the booths you see are independents. If they're not merchants, they're independent game companies. I like this particular booth. They dress it up very well. I mean, yeah, it looks like it's a fire hazard and a danger. People are going to trip over things. This is a little bit more elegant. This is one of the bigger booths. The Animo. Animo is basically kind of like your Pal World / Pokemon kind of creature gathering game. And yeah, they had a good time. And then Nintendo, they had 2 components to the booth. This one was obviously photo op side, and then they had the actual game side. But one of the things look at this Magic one. Look at all that empty space. This is the prime real estate right off the escalators of the convention center. In previous years, that space would not be empty. There would be people there. They would have tables there. They would have stuff for people to do. Or that space would be taken up by another booth. One of the other booths I got to, check out for a little bit was the Atari booth. The Atari booth changed. Like last year's Atari booth, I thought was actually cooler because they had like a Missile Command display where you could actually play Missile Command on this, futuristic console kind of looking thing. And they had like 3 or 4 different cabinets brought in by a company out of Utah called Allen One, who do like an annual or semi-annual or every biannual like Avian Nights tournament. A friend of mine actually competed in and took second place the first time they did. It was a lot of fun. That being said, the Atari booth this year was one specific game was their half of their booth focus, and it wasn't a game I'd ever heard of personally, but I don't keep up on all of the Atari news. So I tried it out. It seemed kind of fun. It was just a platformer. It was okay. There wasn't anything that really grabbed me saying, this character that they made is really, really cool. This character is somebody I care about. It didn't grab me. That it is what it is. The other part of their thing was a bunch of stations where you could play. They had an Intellivision. So they could play on a television, they had a television. They had like some of the older consoles, that their games play on or whatever, and but it really wasn't like, oh my god, Atari nostalgia. Ah. They really were leaning into this new thing, and rather than, the nostalgia side wasn't as exciting. It wasn't popping. It is what it is. What else did I do at PAX East this year? I went to the Standing Stone meetup, as always, because I'm a content creator for both Lord of the Rings Online and Dungeons & Dragons Online. So it was really nice to get to hang out with the developers from Standing Stone. Also, Rich and Linda were at that because Linda works for EverQuest Legends, which is under the Daybreak umbrella. So they and Standing Stone are kind of like cousins, I suppose, under the same, and so they got invited to the party, and it was a lot of fun, and it was great hanging out with some friends, also talking to the developers and fellow players about Lotro and DDO. Let's see, what else is going on? There was some cosplay. I would like to talk about the cosplay scene. PAX East in years past had a massive cosplay scene. You'd have all kinds of cosplay, whether you had your joke cosplay, like the Helldivers dudes that I saw, the Duncan Helldivers. Those folks are cool. You'll see photos of them here. It's basically Duncan is a local Boston institution. They even call them Dunks now. It's just Dunks, not Dunkin' Donuts. And I thought the mashup of Dunkin' Donuts and Helldivers was hilarious, and they really did well with the crafting of the armors. That being said, the cosplay scene really wasn't as great as it could have been. I mean, I saw a She-Ra from the She-Ra and Princess of Power Netflix series from recent days. You see your occasional, you're going to see your Marios, your Luigi's, your Nintendo characters. You're going to see somebody playing Waldo, and I saw him in the company of somebody dressed up in an inflatable Cookie Monster outfit. There's that. But I would have to say that the cosplay scene wasn't as intense as it had been in the past. I mean, you had somebody dressed up as Din Djarin, the Mandalorian with Grogu. You had your couple. There's always going to be a Jedi, a Sith, a couple of Warcraft characters, but there weren't like tons of Final Fantasy characters. There were a couple of like Naruto guys running around, but the cosplay scene really wasn't that intense. It was there. I mean, there were people who were cosplaying, but they were cosplaying because, oh, hey, it's a convention. I can wear my cosplay. Yay. Rather than, oh my god, my favorite voice actor is going to be there. I got to cosplay their character. And so, yeah, I mean, it was there, but it wasn't there, if that makes any sense. So, yeah, it was okay. But it wasn't the way it had been in the past, right? And that's kind of the sad thing, is that's kind of the vibe I got from PAX East this year. Hardly any of the big guns were there. Twitch had a booth there, but there were like empty tables all over the place. They had seating, and there were only a few people hanging out there. Let's see, who else? I mean, the tabletop scene was pretty hopping, but again, there were a lot of empty tables. There was actually more seating for people just to sit down outside of the show floor, like in the spaces where there used to be booths wall to wall. Between like the one wall here with the bathroom and the one wall here on the opposite side of the convention center. You can see the empty space where that black line is in this one in the right hand side. There used to be booths there. You actually used to have like a very small space where that black line of the backdrops were between them and those concrete walls where the bathrooms were, and then the exits out. That used to be space, but now it's just this big gigantic walkway. And in a lot of those spaces, they took out places that used to have booths and put tables there. I was like, where's the booth that would have been here? They had some food trucks in the convention center. Wild Bill's always brings their craft soda out. There were food trucks in the square outside. And in general, it was actually really nice to eat outside. And also, to go back to the cosplay for just a moment, it was what nice weather in Boston. So some years cosplay gets disrupted by Boston weather because it's cold and windy and rainy and snowy, sometimes in the same hour. This Boston, the weather was really nice for almost the entire weekend. So weather did not affect anybody's cosplay that I'm aware of. Um, so in general, it's kind of to wrap it all up here for this video. The overall vibe about PAX East this year was smaller, more indie, more intimate, and for the love of God, put your freaking booth number. Leave it up there for people to find you if you're not a big name who can say, "Oh yeah, we're the Animo booth. You can easily find us." You know, that kind of thing. Again, I was late to a couple of my appointments because I couldn't find them on the show floor. And some of that is not the exhibitor's fault. Some of it is the fact that PAX East kind of has a basic plan for the show floor of how they arrange things, and then they just kind of throw things around at the last minute and switch stuff up, and they don't update the app. And the internet in the convention center is kind of ass anyway. So that is about it for PAX East in general terms. I'm going to be doing a series of videos about specific games that I tried out at PAX, or games that I was interested in and probably didn't have time to actually play. One thing I did note is I really didn't have to wait in line for anything, mainly because I didn't actually try to play the whatever Nintendo game they had on tap. I just basically went to play other things. But that was the only booth that I saw that had any huge line just to play a game. I mean, last year, Larian had a ginormous booth, and their line was like, "Oh yeah, it's a 3-hour wait." Yeah, I'm not standing around for 3 hours, sorry. And that used to be the way of PAX. Pre-COVID, that was how PAX rolled. That you had your Blizzards, you had your Square Enix, you had Larian, you had all these big companies with giant booths taking up 2/3 of the convention center, and the indies are squished in a corner over here. Now it's the rise of the indie developers. One of the biggest group booths was the Games from Poland crew. They brought in like a ton of games. So yeah, it was the rise of the indies and the rise of the merchants. There were big, flashy booths in the A section, which is where all the big names tend to be. And those are just folks selling things like PNY. We're selling graphics cards there. You want to drop $800 on a graphics card, and that was the cheap one. SanDisk had a giant booth there. Bloomhouse had a booth. I didn't really get to see. They were selling some games, but again, a lot of it was just people selling things, and some were big companies, and some weren't. So there was a lot less games in this gaming convention. It was a lot more buy our stuff. And I don't say buy our stuff is necessarily a bad thing, but again, it goes back to the idea that you want to go to a PAX East to play a video game, or to play a card game, or to learn about this tabletop game, or this board game, and there isn't the number of games versus the amount of merchants just selling stuff was very different than it has been in the past. So, speaking of games, though, there were a ton of games. Like, let me show you this. I got a whole stack of cards and goodies from games. Yeah. See, I got this from the Warframe thing. It's got a code on the back. I might give that away to somebody. That one too. But there's I got a ton postcards. I got a ton of business cards. We're going to talk about this game because that was a really good game. That was worth going off-site to their meeting. I'm just saying. We'll talk about Ether and Iron. There's one sweet lady who was going around in this beautiful dress, this beautiful pink dress, and she was offering people an envelope. Let's see. It's in here. It's just a little envelope. It's like, would you like to try a game? And it's just an envelope. And in the envelope, there's some stickers, and there's discussion about the game, Petunia's Purgatory, and I thought that was an adorable way to do some guerrilla marketing for your game, because there's nothing that's like, okay, what is this? Is this a weirdo game? No, it looks like something, a cute pixel art kind of game. So yeah, I've got cards for Akiwan. We're gonna talk about Akiwan. That was an interesting game. I talked to the gentleman behind Team Crescendo, one-man development studio. We've got Reclaim. This one's important. This one is important because it's about the Ojibwe language and bringing back some of their culture. And I thought that was very important. It's not my culture, but I definitely recognize the importance of keeping one's culture. So we're going to talk about that because I did get to play that one. That was a lot of fun. There was actually a science and nerdy, like a fun take on learning about evolution called Cell to Singularity that's been out for a few years now. They had a nice booth. I had a lovely chat with them. This one's cute. Corgis. What was it? What was the name? The actual name? Is it stuck to something? It is stuck to something. Corgi's Cozy Hike. And that was a fun game. The only game I've ever played where your save point is a fire hydrant and you're a corgi whizzing on it. That was glorious. But yeah, there is a lot of indies. I didn't have time to play everything that I wanted to play. So there's going to be some games that I'm going to go grab their demos off of Steam. And we're going to play the demos and see what we like. There was a fishing game called Tiny Reel. There was a builder game called Shantytown. There's a bar running one called Another Pint, and the thing says serve responsibly. So that's a really good tagline. There's one called Cosminer. Yeah, Cosminers, basically cosmic miners. And it's basically you're out mining in a spacesuit. It's kind of cool. But yeah, there's just basically a lot of things to go over. So I'm going to be going over that. And I will have some codes for some of these games. If they're not my preview codes, or if I can find a demo, then I will point you in their direction. So yay. So that's it for the intro to PAX East 2026. I'll have more videos out here in the near future, in and around all my other usual content creation stuff, because I have content creation to do for 2 MMOs. And then I also like to play games on the side. Alright. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, drop a like on it. If you like the channel, drop a subscribe on it, because that, my friends, is free. And then you get all of my videos in your feed. I'm so sorry. Thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Peace.